Prime Minister Netanyahu is sincere about his concerns with respect to Iran. It's understandable why Israel is very concerned about Iran. We are too. But what we've consistently said is we have to stay focused on our ultimate goal, which is preventing Iran from having a nuclear weapon.
Congress has played a hugely important role in helping to build our sanctions on Iran. But they shouldn't play the spoiler now.
Iran's goons in Gaza, its lackeys in Lebanon, its revolutionary guards on the Golan Heights are clutching Israel with three tentacles of terror. Iran and ISIS are competing for the crown of militant Islam. One calls itself the Islamic Republic, the other calls itself the Islamic State. So when it comes to Iran and ISIS, the enemy of your enemy is your enemy.
Good evening and welcome to this special edition of the news today. After weeks of anticipation, debate and hints of partisan politics in Jerusalem and in Washington, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addresses the U.S. Congress today on the Iranian deal in the making with his relationship with U.S. President Barack Obama at an apparent rock bottom. Netanyahu first thanked Obama for his years of support for Israel, but then, of course, laid out a point-by-point case of why he believes the deal in the making is a very bad one that will instead pave the way for Iran's nuclearization. It was a full house, but not everyone was all ears. Midway through Netanyahu's speech, U.S. Barack Obama held scheduled video conference called on foreign policy issues with the French, German, British, and Italian leaders. Meanwhile, in Geneva this morning, talks continued between U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry and his Iranian counterpart, while the EU foreign policy chief warned against spreading fears about a deal that is in fact getting closer. We will go tonight to our correspondents in Washington, D.C., Eli Ochenberg and Matthias Imbar. With me here in the studio right now is Professor of Political Science Yossi Shane. Good evening. Good to have you in the studio. And also Iranian politics analyst Meir Javed Anfar. Good evening. Good to have you back. And with us right now live from Washington, D.C., Economy Minister Naftali Bennett. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining us. Mr. Bennett, let's try to get your first reaction about, let's say, a very successful, we can say, speech in the Congress.
Absolutely. This was a very important speech. I think it moved the dial. More Americans now are going to be persuaded that this deal is an unmitigated disaster, as it is. And I think he persuaded quite a few congressmen from both sides of the aisle to do everything in their ability to stop this bad deal.
You know, I'm trying to understand, and you're saying that maybe more Americans will realize that it is, in fact, a bad deal. But really, will people realize that it's a bad deal? Because, you know, the Americans already know. Even Benjamin Netanyahu said that you can Google it up and you will see the details of this, let's say, so-called agreement. So will people really realize and listen to Benjamin Netanyahu, him trying to convince the world that it is a bad deal?
Yes, I think he laid out a very orderly argument. Especially, he provided a viable alternative to the bad deal, and that's to increase the sanctions, wait, and ultimately Iran will come back to the table with much better conditions. This is a new approach, something that hasn't been really articulated as well as it has this time, and I fully support him.
You know, you're saying that this is a new approach, but you know that this approach was built on a daily basis, let's say, in the last few months since that he decided to go and give the speech in the Congress, that this is not a very good thing for Israeli-U.S. relationship. More than that, if we will think about it, Israel may pay the price about this speech later on, because let's not forget that Barack Obama is still going to be the president of the United States in the next 2 years.
Well, first of all, the Prime Minister neutralized that issue, and he was very clear that he highly respects President Obama and that this is not a personal issue, but this risk, this threat transcends these tactics. And I think he made a very powerful case that's hard to ignore now, that this deal effectively paves the way for a legitimized nuclear bomb. One thing I regret is that the opposition leader, Bougie Herzog and Tzipi Livni and Yair Lapid didn't come to show that the entire Israeli nation stands behind. But I think now the entire nation does stand behind.
Yeah, you know, but Mr. Bennett, you know that at the beginning of his speech, Benjamin Netanyahu mentioned and said that this is not a political issue. This is a worldwide issue. And right now we were saying that Isaac Herzog and Tzipi Livni decided not to come. When it's not a political issue, why is it so important for them to be there?
To show solidarity. You know, I'm also competing with the Prime Minister in these elections. We're rivals. But regarding the very survival of the Jewish state, there is no rivalry. We're all one nation, and we have to stand behind the Prime Minister. I think all in all, this has been a very successful tour. I myself did dozens of meetings with congressmen, senators, media, and I think we've managed to move the dial, and there's a lower chance, a slightly lower chance, that this bad deal will happen.
You know, but Barack Obama, and I want to believe and that what he's saying still that he believes that Benjamin Netanyahu is really genuine when he is really worried about this upcoming deal. But still, I don't believe that the President of the United States, who will be signed on this deal, will let Iran get to a nuclear weapon, will let Iran get to a nuclear bomb. That will jeopardize the Jewish state, and that will jeopardize the Middle East. I want to believe that President Barack Obama is not that, let's say, naive to the Iranian nuclear aspirations.
There's a very big difference between a small state that's flanked by Hezbollah, ISIS, Iran, etc., and America, which is an ocean away. I think that's the source of the difference. But I think all in all, this has been successful. I've got a plane to catch, so I want to thank you at this point.
Okay, and Mr. Naftali Bennett, I won't let you miss the plane. We're looking forward to see you here in the studio and talk a little bit more about that. Thank you very much.
You got it, Lucy.
So, gentlemen, you wanted to ask him a question,
yeah.
and you were saying?
All this trip, with all the risks that was contained in it, you know, we just sidelined the President of the United States, by the way, you know, okay. Prime Minister Netanyahu says that he didn't want to, this is not a disrespect. Yes, verbally it's not, but in action it is. But okay, let's put that all aside. We took this great risk with this trip before even Iran has accepted a deal. We don't know if Khamenei is going to accept this deal. So what I want to know is, what if Khamenei ultimately says no?
And then they will have to go again for another round of talks.
No, that's not sure. There's going to be additional sanctions. Khamenei could be doing the work for us. We didn't have to risk our relations with the United States. We didn't have to do all this. Then this would have been all for nothing.
So you know, what does it mean, really? If Iran will say, no, I don't agree for this deal.
There is a dynamic
and
here.
not only that, just before, they said, you know what, Benjamin Netanyahu giving a speech in the Congress, it's really good for us. It's going to work in our benefit. And I want to understand how they see it working in their benefit. Maybe because they planned to say no. They're planning to say, we don't want this deal.
Notwithstanding what the Iranians want, there is a question here on the table. The question was marred by the political controversy, as Netanyahu himself indicated. The controversy was because of the form, not because of the content. The form was Benjamin Netanyahu going to Washington seemed at the time to upstage a president and seemed at the time to be a partisan move on the part of the chairman of the Congress that was, in fact, brought Netanyahu to Congress without notifying the president. That created a big brouhaha. Now we moved on. The move is that Netanyahu came to town, to the chagrin of some, to the to the enthusiastic support of others. When he's in the hall, everybody's coming and summoning, and now the message. The message was a very sophisticated message. First of all, we are online with you, Mr. President, in terms of the general concerns. We are respectful of the presidency and respectful of your contribution to Israel's.
But the act is not respectful.
But, no, I don't think so. The act before was very controversial and disrespectful. Now it was. It was a correction on the part of Netanyahu. Bennett may be the one who never wants to apologize. Netanyahu apologized in indirect fashion. Second, now when we set the record straight, and I was never intending it to be political, what is the message? And the message is clear. You are into a bad deal. A bad deal is because of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He laid the argument about the structure and about the specifics. That was a brilliant speech on his part. He also enticed the public. He enticed the Europeans, he enticed the public, and he told them, look, the alternative to the deal is not war, as people are suggesting, but a better deal. Secondly, don't let me think, as you have argued, that the Iranians somehow will drop the bomb. Drop the bomb, basically,
Yes.
to drop the deal.
Yeah.
Said, on the contrary, they will come back to the table. He's correct about that as well. Congress still hold the key to sanctions. And if indeed Iranians are dropping, Congress will enact sanctions, and Netanyahu's move to appease the president, to appease the secretary, as they call him, his friend, and so on, will be yielding benefits for him in terms of his pressure, undoubtedly. I was surprised by how good the speech was. I was very skeptical of Netanyahu, and I criticized the move politically. But nevertheless, one have to give credit to the prime minister. He gave a very, very good, detailed speech about what needs to be done, why this deal is dangerous, and how America and Israel can move together. That was to his tribute.
I think Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech was full of fantasy. I really think that he was fantasizing. To think, let's just put this scenario. Prime Minister Netanyahu says, we say to Iran, no, we don't accept it, go back. Will the Iranians sit at home, twiddle their thumbs and say, okay, we're just going to suffer now and then go back on our knees? No. They will go back and ramp up the enrichment. Next time they will come to the negotiation table, it's very possible that they will say, you know, the 20% enrichment we were willing to give up in the first place, we're not going to negotiate over that. We're going to negotiate over higher levels of enrichment. That means that we've lost, number one. Number two, to push the Iranians away this way, it could actually embolden those who want to continue and to strengthen the military and nuclear program. I don't want the Iranian regime to have a nuclear weapon either. But to think that Iran is just going to go away and going to come back on its knees without doing anything is fantasy. Of course, Prime Minister's point of view. The other fantasy of the Prime Minister is that the Iranians are going to give up their support for Hezbollah. They're going to give up their support for Daesh. I mean, for the Houthis in Yemen. This is not, again, we all want this, but whether it's... Why don't we include something else? If we really want Israel to be popular in Iran, why don't we include a condition in the deal that the Iranian regime stops abusing human rights in Iran? I mean, while we're there, why don't we just go all the way?
I would say that...
He used that in the speech.
He said that about his executions. I beg to differ.
So before you continue continue this, and I know that you want to continue this, let's do just a little pause. The Israeli Prime Minister's speech to Congress has now come and gone. But the talks between Iran and the P5+1 nations over the Islamic Republic's nuclear program are still ongoing. I-24 News reporter Shai Ben-Ari looks into the diplomatic back and forth of the last few days surrounding the speech and the talks.
Nuclear diplomacy played out on the global media stage. Ahead of the Israeli Prime Minister's speech to Congress, the White House was on the defensive, with the president himself explaining the finer details of a possible nuclear deal with Iran in an interview to Reuters.
If, in fact, Iran can accept terms that would ensure a one-year breakout period for 10 years or longer, during that period, we know Iran is not developing a nuclear weapon. Why would we not take that deal when we know the alternatives, whether through sanctions or military actions, will not result in as much assurance that Iran's developing a nuclear weapon?
But if the Americans were already defending a deal that hasn't been signed yet, the Iranians struck a different tone Tuesday, with Foreign Minister Mohammad Jawad Zarif saying Obama's stance concerning a breakout period, which would allow a military strike on Iran's nuclear facilities should the Islamic Republic cast the deal aside, was expressed in unacceptable and threatening phrases, and that Iran would not accept excessive and illogical demands. While the administration has been quite open with many of the details of the proposed deal, concern was voiced over the exact contents of Netanyahu's speech in this respect.
That is, we were incredibly disappointed that some Israeli officials were saying Prime Minister Netanyahu would reveal sensitive information. I think they were saying this when he was on the way over here would reveal sensitive information about the negotiations. Any release of any kind of information like that would, of course, betray that trust.
Netanyahu's position is that Iran must dismantle even its civilian nuclear infrastructure. In her speech to the AIPAC Policy Conference, the U.S. National Security Advisor made it clear what the administration thinks of that.
I know that some of you will be urging Congress to insist that Iran forgo its domestic enrichment capacity entirely. But as desirable as that would be, it is neither realistic nor achievable.
While many feel that a deal is fast approaching, Obama attempted to lower expectations.
It is probably still more likely than not that Iran doesn't get to yes. But I think that, in fairness to them, they have been serious negotiators. I'm less concerned, frankly, with Prime Minister Netanyahu's commentary than I am with Congress taking actions that might undermine the talks before they're completed.
Talks will continue, at least for a few more weeks.
You want to answer.
There's several assumptions here. There is, of course, the President's view about that, and the President ran into opposition in Congress. Don't forget, in the State of the Union address, the President said that if you will impose sanctions, I will veto it. Netanyahu's case for sanction was really strengthened tonight. The Congress will have to look into it, and the pressure on the administration will be immense. The very idea of the year-long sort of like opening being stretched for 10 years, legitimizing the entire project is going to be under duress, in my opinion. Now, there is also an understanding in the administration that the Iranians have not taken any deal yet. And that means also that the Iranians can still exert pressure on the administration to get a better deal even before the deal is signed. This will also add to the pressure on the administration not to cave in. In that respect, Netanyahu achieved his goal, if this has happened. And nevertheless, that game is not over by all means. Now, one cannot expect the Iranians, of course, to stop Hezbollah, and so no one is expecting that. But Netanyahu has, in my opinion now, has a very strong case to tell the West that if Iran thinks that they're going to move in their direction, there is a lot to be done in Washington, especially when the oil market is so low, to impose sanctions, and Congress is ready to impose sanctions.
But not to link it to the nuclear deal.
It will be linked to all what Netanyahu. With all due respect, I'm also from Washington, and I have a little bit experience of how Congress works. Okay. Congress right now is tilting. It's tilting toward Netanyahu. Whether he will have the votes, yet to be seen. I wouldn't make any gamble. But right now, the speech made a point. Obama's cannot be too much seen to be in opposition to Netanyahu because it's belittled the president. It seems as if he's dovetailing Netanyahu rather than leading. He wants to lead, and therefore he also does not have to oppose him too much because it gives him the credence of dealing with American foreign policy. That's a very tight act to follow, and therefore the president was trying somehow to lower his criticism of the Prime Minister.
Unlike the professor, I'm not from Washington, I'm from Iran. And I think the demands that have been made from Iran, as much as I don't like this regime, and I don't like is an understatement, I think, again, it's fantasy to expect the Iranian regime to put its influence on Hezbollah and other places on a plate and link it to the nuclear program. It is not going to happen. Yes. So are we going to basically make unreasonable demands that would isolate us, or make reasonable demands to make sure that Iran is as far away from a bomb as possible?
So let's join to this conversation. Joining us right now from London is Dr. Ali Nourizadeh, Director of the Center of Iranians and Arab Studies. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining us. I believe that you watched the Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech. What do you think about the speech? Maybe if you heard here Mayor Javed Anfar saying it was full of fantasies?
Well, first of all, hello to you and your colleagues and to your viewers. First of all, Mr. Netanyahu made a couple of mistakes as far as the history concerned. When he was talking about the Jewish people, and when he talks about Queen Esther was the wife of King Ahasuerus. Zexel, who is grandson of Kuros, Cyrus the Great, who helped Jewish people to go back to their homeland, to their Holy Land. So I thought if Mr. Netanyahu wanted in one way to separate the Iranian people from the Iranian regime, he should have shed light on the positive side of Iranian in their relation, in historical relation with Jewish people. The Iranian always helped Jewish. You have to distinguish between the regime, the aim of regime, and the Iranian people. That was one. I expected him to say something that he appreciates the Iranian views, the Iranian people. That's one. Second of all, when Mr. Netanyahu is talking about a deal for 10 years, can you get better than this deal? To freeze the Iranian attempt to build a nuclear bomb for 10 years, to watch them, observe their movement, do not allow them to go underground. I think that's the greatest or the best point of a presumed deal which is going to be signed. I believe it's going to be signed within 2-3 weeks' time. So therefore, I think Mr. Netanyahu also should have given more support to President Obama. Obama, managed to get whatever was possible to get. He managed to convince the Iranian that's the only way out. And I think the Iranian began to understand. Rouhani, Rafsanjani, Khatami, Zarif, these people, they know that's the only way out. And that's why they put pressure on Khamenei to accept.
But Mr. Ali Nourizadeh, Dr. Zadeh, we can talk a lot about what the Iranians and their connections to the Jewish people, and we know that this deal might be not a good deal because just a few days ago, I think it was 2 weeks ago, when I sat down here, you were sitting there, and we said that this deal might not be a good deal even for Iran because, like Benjamin Netanyahu was saying, it doesn't include the missile program, it doesn't include actually dismantling one of the nuclear fabrics, it doesn't include a lot of things that might get this, what you're saying, this watching Iran, making sure that they're not getting to a bomb like you're saying. Maybe this deal is not getting there. It's not giving the privilege to the West, to the P5+1, to actually watch Iran and make sure that it's not getting to a bomb.
No, my dear, if Iran sign NPT and keep, to the point that the international Atomic Energy Agency, they accept that Iran is honest, decent. I think that's great achievement. I don't trust the Iranian regime. One of your participants mentioned that we hate Iranian regime. I hate more because they deprived me from living in my country, to see my mother and my sister and brothers. So I hate them. But that doesn't mean that I don't see the fact. The fact is, there are millions of Iranians. They put pressure on the regime to get this deal. The Iranian, they want the sanction to be lifted. The economy is in shambles. The value of reals is just dropping like a hell. So therefore, this is a necessity. This must be done, whether Mr. Khamenei likes it or not. And I say, in the next step, when some barriers are away, in the next step, then they can put more pressure on Iran, more pressure as far as ballistic missile concerned, as far as our chief concerned. You cannot have everything in one go.
In one goal, exactly. Dr. Zadeh, let's give Professor Shane and Mayor Javedan Fard to ask you, or maybe create here the conversation.
First of all, I think that Dr. Zadeh probably noticed in Netanyahu's speech that he spoke highly of the Iranian people. And he spoke highly about their intelligence and how their life have been hijacked by the revolution. I understand the sensitivities. It's always difficult to be an exile from a country that on the one hand aspires to represent the nation. On the other hand, many part of the nations are outside the nation in exile or in opposition and cannot. And this is a very big dilemma. You want to be part of the nation, and you are in some respect opposed to the regime. The distinction between the state, the nation, the regime is a very difficult one, especially for a man like Dr. Zadeh, who resides in exile, and the loyalty dilemma is very tough. But there is an issue here, and the issue here, aside from the point, is to what extent the Iranian regime's commitment, as articulated by Netanyahu, to the destruction of the state of Israel. As he said, the supreme leader tweeting about that. And this is something very serious that is taken serious by the people of Israel and by the people in America. Now, the key factor will be whether this deal, and this is a big question, whether this deal that Obama is now suggesting in the making, perhaps if the Iranians accept or not, is going to curtail the program, or whether it's in effect will give it some degree of, as he said, a ride that eventually will be materialized, if not now, 10 years from now. It's a very big question.
Is it a big question, Dr. Nourizadeh? Is it this is the main question?
Yes, I agree with him. Yes, this is the main question. But what I'm saying is Khamenei is not going to last forever. They are talking about him having a year or a couple of years. Then these fundamentalists or radicals in Iran, the people, they have no respect for them. I mean, of course, they have their own groups and their own people, but as a matter of fact, there is 80 or 78 million Iranian. They are living there. They don't want to destroy Israel. They want to enjoy having good relation with Israel. In 2009, in Green Movement, you heard no Lebanon, no Palestine. Yes. That meant the Iranian, they don't want to get involved in this conflict. So therefore, majority of the Iranian, they look to Israel as a friend, not as an enemy.
Yes.
And I think every Israeli politician should notice that and consider it.
Absolutely.
Yes, Dr. Ali Nourizadeh, thank you very much for this. One last comment.
The Prime Minister could have made a difference. President Peres did it. He said, we don't have a problem with the people of Iran. We respect them. The regime is different. He didn't make a difference.
It did.
And also, I'm not so sure Haman was a Persian. He was an Agagite. So
look, I was sitting here as an advocate of the Prime Minister. I was very critical of the Prime Minister going to Washington. But I always like to give credit when credit is due. He did say that. He made a very important point about the Iranian people, about how innovative they are, the old civilization of Iran, and how they've been hijacked by the mullahs in 1979, and how this kind of like how they spew. He talked about how the executions in Iran of the opposition, etc. So one has to give credit for the Prime Minister for his speech.
I believe that Benjamin Netanyahu will get a lot of credit or less credit in the next few days. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you so much
for being with me in this part. We're going out for a small break, 2 minutes, and I'll be back. Don't go anywhere.
Prime Minister Netanyahu is sincere about his concerns with respect to Iran. It's understandable why Israel is very concerned about Iran. We are too. But what we've consistently said is we have to stay focused on our ultimate goal, which is preventing Iran from having a nuclear weapon.
Congress has played a hugely important role in helping to build our sanctions on Iran. But they shouldn't play the spoiler now.
Iran's goons in Gaza, its lackeys in Lebanon, its revolutionary guards on the Golan Heights are clutching Israel with 3 tentacles of terror. Iran and ISIS are competing for the crown of militant Islam. One calls itself the Islamic Republic, the other calls itself the Islamic State. So when it comes to Iran and ISIS, the enemy of your enemy is your enemy.
Welcome back to this special edition of the news today. After Netanyahu's speech in the Congress, with me right now is my favorite duo, is Mark Tell, co-chair Republicans Abroad Israel. Good evening.
Good evening, Lucy.
And good to have you here back again.
Good to have you back.
Yes, I was really far away. Actually, not so far. And Sheldon Shore of the Democrats Abroad Israel. Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you very much for coming. Okay, gentlemen, I want to tell you go, but before I will tell you go, I will tell you what I think about what I heard today, and except that one might argue that it was or wasn't a good speech. Of course, Benjamin Netanyahu knows how to speak to the American. Benjamin Netanyahu feels really comfortable when he speaks English. Benjamin Netanyahu, in fact, maybe has some aspirations in the future to be the president of the United States. When I am saying what is the bill that Israel is going to pay after this speech, it was a good speech. He made some good points, but Israel is going to pay a big bill, because what he did today to US President Barack Obama was, let's say, not nice.
All right, I think I can say,
Yes.
first of all, I don't think there'll be a big bill. I honestly don't.
You don't think that?
No, I think, frankly, okay, is there a tension between the United States and between the president and Netanyahu on this? And it's very understandable why the president was opposed. In the way that it was done, the Republican leadership inviting Netanyahu behind the president's back, etc. The interference in the political process in America, in the struggle between Congress and the president over who has the right and the power to make decisions regarding foreign policy, and between Democrats and Republicans. It was an unfortunate intrusion. It's an unfortunate complication, and that is. But I think that is a temporary bump. I think that both President Obama said yesterday, and Netanyahu said in the beginning of his speech that the intention of the speech was not to engage in any politics, and that politics was unfortunately inserted into it, and that and Netanyahu is speaking to defend the interests of the State of Israel by discussing something which affects the State of Israel. And in America, which is built on the First Amendment, which talks about open and free exchange of ideas, this was an open and free exchange of ideas, where two parties can differ, but they have a right to express their ideas. And in this case, of course, the final decision is not left up to the State of Israel, but left to the United States.
But, you know, going to the Congress, going to the United States, standing in a Congress, poking Barack Obama in the eye and telling him, this is, okay, we know that you stand next to us. We know that you helped us. I know that during Operation Protective Edge, we used your help. But this, what you're about to do, is a really bad deal, and the Americans need to know that.
Lucy,
come on, the Americans don't know that?
Wait a minute. First of all, you know, you're on some kind of a trip over here, Lucy. I'm a little surprised at you, because you're usually a little bit more neutral about these things. I mean, Sheldon himself just told you that this is not going to cost Israel anything really significant in terms of its relationship with the United States, and I agree with him. I don't agree with his premises about how this was done. This was a Republican initiative which the White House knew about, and as the New York Times ultimately had to concede. But that's not the point. This is not about protocol. Never was about protocol. Was never about bad feelings, or really even about the personality clashes that between the president and the prime minister. This was a fundamental difference between the United States and Israel about the nature of the Iranian threat. And what you have to think about here is the way the White House reacted to this. I mean, even today, even in the interview that we just saw pieces of here on the show, the president and his staff acted in a way that demonstrated fundamental fundamental concerns about the Israeli position. They did not want this speech to happen. It wasn't that the Republicans went behind their back, because they didn't want Netanyahu to articulate the arguments against this agreement. And they were afraid of that. And they are still afraid of that.
Usually, like you're saying, I'm really neutral, and usually, like you're saying, I'm very balanced, but, I'm also
but
really
tonight,
not.
You're not.
Yeah, no. But also, I'm a little bit, I want to be, I don't know, sometimes I'm saying to myself, maybe I'm naive. And as a naive person, I'm asking myself, oh, let me think a little bit. 2 weeks before the Israeli elections, when Benjamin Netanyahu
do you think this, Lucy, with all due, I know Sheldon wants to come in. Do you think that this whole event in the United States is going to seriously help Benjamin Netanyahu in the elections? It's cost him. I think it's cost him dearly.
We know the
I think it's going to backfire in the elections.
We know the position of Israeli prime ministers about the nuclear program. We know what he thinks about the nuclear program. We know how
it's not for the Israeli audience, Lucy. It's not for the Israeli audience.
But he is convincing the people who are already convinced. So why you're doing this?
He's not. He is making a statement about a fundamental existential threat to the state of Israel before as he said it, the largest parliament and the most powerful parliament in the world, and to the American people at large and the world at large. That's who he's speaking to.
One of the I think the important points he made there was that the alternative to this deal is not necessarily war. If the alternative to the deal were war, that would scare and frighten many Americans because they, as American people, generally do not want to get involved again in another war in the Middle East, especially after Iraq and Afghanistan, which was very, very, very costly and with very mixed results. But the purpose of the speech was to let the American people know that what is at stake, and what is at stake is not to let Iran get the bomb. Now, with this, there are some fundamental differences in the approach between Israel and America on how the nature of the deal should be. Apparently, the Americans want to prevent Iran from having a bomb, whereas Mr. Netanyahu is interested in preventing Iran from having the capability of having a bomb, and that's a lot stronger than that. And that makes the difference between the statements between Susan Rice saying this is a good deal and Mr. Netanyahu saying it's a bad deal.
He did something else, Lucy, which was I think a game changer in terms of the debate, because he said that and this we haven't heard before, that the conditions, that one of the things that needs to go into the agreement to make it a better agreement, if that's possible, I hope it is, we all hope it is, is to insert 3 conditions. One, that Iran would stop aggression against its neighbors, and that, which doesn't mean Israel, stop supporting terrorism around the world, okay, which it is doing, and as you know, yes, even to this moment, and stop threatening to annihilate Israel as a state. And now that's an important new dimension to this whole discussion, because the P5+1 have not been discussing this. Israel has been excluded, not because there's any kind of concern about leaks, but because the Iranians wouldn't have it that way. And so the Western powers, just like the Europeans did in 1938, are kind of leaving the potential victim open to attack and trying to negotiate its fate. Well, this prime minister, and I think it was an act of courage, I must tell you, to go to Washington and to take the possible consequences that he may have to pay here in Israel in 2 weeks, to go to Washington and state this case as he has consistently, long before he was prime minister. He was the one that brought the world around, and the American president around, and the American Congress to impose sanctions in the first place. He was the one that really pointed out the scope of the threat.
Nobody's right now thinking of starting a P5+1 sort of talk to stop England or France from having a bomb, because England and France are not countries that promote terrorism, that promote jihad, are not destabilizing factors in the world. And although it's worrying that countries do have the bomb to the extent that they do, these countries do not bother us. Why is Iran bothering us? For precisely those reasons, because it supports terrorism, etc. So Mr. Netanyahu wants verification that they will change their stripes, that they are no longer involved in these activities. Because if they are involved in these activities and they have this powerful bomb, that would make the world much more dangerous.
Before we continue, correspondent Shai Ben-Ari breaks down some of the highlights of Netanyahu's speech today. Let's see.
The climactic event that has been anticipated for weeks now by Israelis, Americans, and others in the international community finally arrived Tuesday, as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu arrived on Capitol Hill for a speech to a joint session of the U.S. Congress. The House was packed, though not entirely by its usual inhabitants. 57 congressional Democrats were absent, conveying their protest at the manner of Netanyahu's arrival in Washington by staying at home. The prime minister began by attempting to smooth over tensions with the White House.
I deeply regret that some perceive my being here as political. That was never my intention.
But no representative of the administration was present, neither senior nor junior. Vice President Joe Biden's seat was filled by Republican Senator Orrin Hatch, president pro tempore of the Senate. Netanyahu soon turned to the matter at hand, Iran, drawing a comparison with the other jihadist threat that has captivated international attention recently.
To defeat ISIS and let Iran get nuclear weapons would be to win the battle but lose the war. We can't let that happen.
The prime minister then moved on to the problems he sees in the proposed deal currently on the table.
That any deal with Iran will include two major concessions to Iran. Not a single nuclear facility would be demolished. Iran's breakout time would be very short, about a year by U.S. assessment, even shorter by Israel's.
Netanyahu did not divulge classified information, instead using his own analysis of the information available to the public, pointing out the problem of placing too much faith in inspectors.
Iran was also caught twice, not once, twice, operating secret nuclear facilities in Natanz and Qom, facilities that inspectors didn't even know existed. The second major concession creates an even greater danger, that Iran could get to the bomb by keeping the deal.
The prime minister then put forth his suggested demands of the Iranians.
The world should demand that Iran do three things. First, stop its aggression against its neighbors in the Middle East. Second, stop supporting terrorism around the world. And third, stop threatening to annihilate my country, Israel, the one and only Jewish state.
At times, it seemed Netanyahu was attempting to teach a course in negotiation skills.
Now, if Iran threatens to walk away from the table, and this often happens in a Persian bazaar, call their bluff. They'll be back because they need the deal a lot more than you do.
Towards the end, the prime minister once again noted his faith in the U.S.'s support of Israel.
But I know that Israel does not stand alone. I know that America stands with Israel. I know that you stand with Israel.
After finishing his speech, Netanyahu remained on the podium for a number of minutes, basking in the applause. The coming days will reveal if he receives a similar reception back home.
Yes. Let's say hello to diplomatic correspondent for the News Today. Eli Ochenberg is in Washington, D.C. Good evening, Eli. So first reactions from, let's say, American administrations or first reactions that we see in American media. What do you hear there after this, we might say, we can't say it. It was a good speech.
Yes, Lucy. Well, first of all, good to have you back in our studio. Well, you've been talking on and on about the substance of the speech, but here, what the White House correspondents were talking about is the warm welcome Prime Minister Netanyahu received. They say that even the U.S. President Barack Obama himself does not receive such support when he comes into Congress. But the opposition to Netanyahu and his speech is very vocal, especially now after they heard what he had to say, saying he offers no alternative, no other solution. It was an unfortunate speech, they say. Let's hear what Congressman John Yarmouth from Kentucky told us only a short while ago.
I think it was a very unfortunate appearance. To me, it was just taking out the Dick Cheney playbook and trying to play fearmonger and scare people into pressuring the administration to take a different direction, at the same time not offering any alternative that's realistic. So I think the speech was exactly what I expected, why I did not appreciate the fact that he was coming to make this speech, and I think that it was not productive and was great political theater, though.
But, you know, still, everyone stood up each and every time that he had a punchline.
No, it was really astonishing. They were standing up, applauding more than they were sitting down, listening. He really received a very, very warm welcome. But again, the opposition to Netanyahu and his Iran speech is very aggressive as well, and I believe we will hear more from them in the future. So a lot of support inside the Congress hall, but and the Obama administration and the Democratic Party, not so much.
Ellie, who were the audience inside the Congress today?
Well, we missed a couple of dozens of Democratic Party members. Almost all Republican Party members were there. The halls were completely full. There was no single seat open. Of course, the many guests and other supporters we could have seen. Of course, Netanyahu's wife rooting for him passionately, constantly. It was really a full house, a very supportive one, as we've seen yesterday at the APA conference. It was a very supportive environment, as supportive as an environment can get, I guess.
Yes, diplomatic correspondent for the News Today, Ali Ochenberg. Thank you very much for this.
Lucy,
what?
Where was the Republican response, or the pro-Israel Democratic response?
Maybe everyone went to a dinner after applauding him so much. They invited him for a dinner.
I'd expect you to show both on this one, on your report.
But you were here for this, and you were giving this.
Oh, is that how? That's
of course, you were here. Why were
Actually, what I'm wondering.
You know, just before what you're going to say, isn't it going and convincing the people who are already convinced? Because when you're giving a speech to the Republicans, and all the Republicans are getting up and applauding you.
It's not just the Republicans.
To the
Sheldon, tell them.
No,
it was not just the Republicans.
All right. First of all, the speech was given to Congress, and there was bipartisan support. Both Democrats and Republicans support Israel. It's not one side is in favor, one side is against. God forbid. Both sides support Israel. That's not the issue. And the Democrats who did not attend, it wasn't done because of lack of support of Israel. It's because of the conflict of the political internal fighting that made them uncomfortable.
They're siding with the White House.
But I'm just wondering what effect this speech is going to have, of course, on the negotiations. What effect will this speech have? And one thing is, it's not only the United States. First of all, the speech was said not only to Congress, it was said to everyone in America. They was speaking over their heads to the common people can understand why it's necessary to be firm against Iran.
Let me give you an anecdote.
No, let me
Sheldon,
finish.
I'm not cutting you off, but I just want to...
You are cutting me off.
No,
the other thing is, that you're right. You're not cutting me.
Anecdote.
You're right. You're not cutting me off. Okay. The second thing is that he's also speaking to the partners who are negotiating right now. And will this speech give them some more ammunition to talk tougher with Iran, saying that they have to deal with these issues as well, because these are issues which are important to the American people as well, and preventing the Iran from having a bomb or having the capability of having a bomb.
Let me just tell you my anecdote, Lucy. It was just a random call that I got from a client of mine in the law office who was from the state of Rhode Island, which is a Democratic state. And he was calling about some professional matter, and he said that the only thing that he could think about was being in front of the television when the Netanyahu speech came on. I mean, I think millions and millions of Americans from all parts of the political spectrum were keen on watching this speech. And that's why your question is not really germane. It's not how many people in Congress he convinced. The Congress is behind Netanyahu. The Democrats are behind. Yesterday at the AIPAC conference, Robert Menendez, a Democrat, the ranking Democrat on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, he came out and spoke adamantly in favor of the Netanyahu perspective and against the White House approach to this, because he understands, and that's the way most Americans feel about this. And I think that's the function of the speech. We're not counting votes in the House and the Senate after the speech. We're seeing what the constituents back home are going to be writing to their representatives.
Everyone agree here in this table, and I think that all our viewers agree that Iran should not be nuclear, that Iran should not be given the power to be terror, Islamic state that will terrorize the world, that will be, let's say, a big, I don't know how to, a big threat to the world.
You said it well.
To the world. So I think that everybody agrees about this.
Right.
But and again, he pointed some things that, you know, we're not as surprised because comparing it to Daesh, saying that the details of Iran.
No, he didn't compare it to Daesh.
What are the issues? No,
he didn't compare it to Daesh. What he said, and this is an interesting
observation. The enemy of your enemy is actually your enemy.
No, but yes, he said that, but he also said something very, very profound, I thought, in terms of a geopolitical analysis. He said, "Listen, there is a vacuum that's been caused.
And they're filling it.
ISIS, Daesh is filling that vacuum, and if the coalition, such as it is, the Americans and the Iranians and the Iraqis and whoever else, beat Daesh eventually, God, you know, inshallah, then there will be another vacuum, and who will fill it?
Iran.
Right,
exactly.
So this is one of the interesting questions which will be coming up in the future is the effect of this speech will have. Did this speech change the parameters, the dynamics of the discussion with respect to Iran? In that this speech says Iran is a threat and it has to be stopped. Iran is not behaving like a normal country, therefore the rules of a normal country should not be applied to it. Now, if the terms of references that this speech creates, let's say, for example, in the future when President Obama presents the plan, if a deal is ever made and he presents it, will he have to make his presentation with reference to this, somehow answering the questions that this raised? And that's one of the things that this speech, the purpose of the speech, was to change the terms of the debate.
You know, Barack Obama just gave a call in the middle of the speech. Barack Obama gave a call to the P5+1 countries and made a conference call. Right. Yes. So what are the chances that maybe he waited to hear what Benjamin Netanyahu has to say?
I think he
just
knew.
Took some points there and told them, oh, listen, to this point and this point and this point, we didn't pay attention. He got a point in what he's saying. Let's try to renegotiate this entire
I think
deal.
he has to be concerned. The president needs to be concerned about this. I don't know if this is going to stop him from his headlong desire to do a deal with the Iranians at any price.
And I just will tell you that Obama just gave his first reaction saying that Benjamin Netanyahu didn't offer any alternative.
Okay, great. I mean, that's and he also said unofficially beforehand, which I don't know if your reporter covered it, that he's all talk and no action. Okay, now this whole approach to Iran, thank God, up till now, has been all talk and
no action.
And no action, well, it's been sanctions, okay? And it's gone that far. Now, what are they doing in Geneva now? Well, they're doing more talking, and they're talking about getting rid of the sanctions. All right, I think what we really need to see is what happens in the Congress about this. Now, this is where the Congress is going to have a role to play, and it has bipartisan support. Senator Menendez and others have now reintroduced legislation to cause this agreement to come back to Congress for a second look in the whatever is eventually agreed to.
How much they can actually influence? Because
there is a requirement in the Constitution that all treaties have to be approved by 2/3.
Well, the president doesn't call this a treaty.
So that is the issue. Okay. That's one of the issues. This is a question of constitutional definition as to whether or not this is a quote-unquote
I agree
treaty
with Sheldon on this. I agree with Sheldon on this. But the reason, the uncertainty about the legal status of this agreement, whether it's a treaty or just an ordinary executive agreement, is the reason why this legislation is being passed in Congress or introduced in Congress to cause this agreement, notwithstanding any debate we may have about the treaty status of it, to come in front of the Congress, to give it a second look, let the Congress make their own determination. Now the question will be, if the Congress, for example, decides to reject the agreement, okay, then what will the president be able to do? He under the Constitution, he can veto. Then the question will be, of course, will there be sufficient votes in the House and Senate to override this veto? They're required 2/3 in each House. And for that, the Democrats are going to have a lot to say. The Republicans can't do it alone. The Democrats are going to have to go along with this if that's going to happen.
Right. So this is, again, the question, the fundamental question, is it a good deal or a bad deal?
You know, when he approached to the Iranians, basically, one of the points was that the Iranians, he doesn't look at the Iranians, that we should like make a difference between the regime and the people of Iran, that the people of Iran might not be against the Jews or may not be against Israel. And but when you impose more sanctions on Iran, isn't it creating like an opposite effect on these people that you're talking, that they are not against Israel, that they are not against the United States, because at the end of the day, the sanctions are affecting the people themselves more than they affecting the regime.
I think first of all, Iran and Israel had wonderful relations before the regime came in. Israel used to buy all of its oil from Iran. Israel had, I know of Israeli builders. What? Pistachios. Sure. Israel used to send builders. They had enormous contracts for construction in the country there. There were wonderful relations between the Israeli and the Iranian people, so there's nothing fundamentally bad about that. But when the revolution came, making it a jihadist regime, exporting Islam militarily, that's when things changed. Now, what is Iran today? Has it fundamentally changed? Well, according to Mr. Netanyahu, it has not fundamentally changed, in which case it is still a threat, in which case America is still the great Satan, and that the purpose of the talks is to get is ultimately to get the bomb, a deal that will pave its way to the bomb. That's why he considers it a bad deal.
I'm sorry, I'm going to cut you off, but I want to address your question, Lucy, about the effect on the people. Sanctions will hurt the people. They are hurting the people of Iran.
They were very effective towards the end.
And the people of Iran are not actually doing anything right now to, you know, it's like asking the people in the Gaza Strip, why you're not going against Hamas when you're suffering so much? And they're not going because they can't. And this is, in one way, in a big way, this is what is happening in Iran, because it seems that the Iranians are not able to go out to the streets and say, okay, the regime is bad for us, we want a different regime. First
of all, you remember in the beginning of Obama's presidency, there was an uprising. In 2009, the American government decided to sit on its hands. Now the thought is, and the hope is, that if the sanctions bite and they continue to make people's lives difficult, they're going to ask, why is this? One possible reaction is they're going to blame the West and the United States, the big Satan and the little Satan.
Yes.
Another possibility is they're going to say, wait a minute. I mean, our leadership has pushed this issue to a brink. The world is against us. We need a change. We're going to take it in our fate in our own hands.
Gentlemen, it was a pleasure, as always, having you here in the studio. Thank you very much.
It's our pleasure, Lucy, to have you back.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for being with me. 2 minutes, and I'll be back. Election time.
Prime Minister Netanyahu is sincere about his concerns with respect to Iran. It's understandable why Israel is very concerned about Iran. We are too. But what we've consistently said is we have to stay focused on our ultimate goal, which is preventing Iran from having a nuclear weapon.
Congress has played a hugely important role in helping to build our sanctions on Iran. But they shouldn't play the spoiler now.
Iran's goons in Gaza, its lackeys in Lebanon, its revolutionary guards on the Golan Heights are clutching Israel with three tentacles of terror. Iran and ISIS are competing for the crown of militant Islam. One calls itself the Islamic Republic, the other calls itself the Islamic State. So when it comes to Iran and ISIS, the enemy of your enemy is your enemy.
Yes, I missed Israeli elections. Welcome back to the special edition after Benjamin Netanyahu's speech to Congress. We shift now to the effect on the Israeli political arena with just 2 weeks left until the election. With me right now in the studio is Mr. Dov Liepman, Israeli member of parliament of the Jaffa Port. Good evening. Good to have you here. Professor of political science, Dr. Hani Zubaydah. Good evening.
Hi, Lucy. How are you?
Missed me, I know.
Yes, I did.
And Zev Ben Shahal, director of the Israel Education at Jerusalem U. Good evening. Thank you very, very much for coming. So, what will happen? Come on. It's the first show that we're after a week, and you're already getting SMS.
It's all about Benjamin Netanyahu's speech. We're getting more and more things.
I'm sure.
Yes, all of them.
Let's first reaction from each and every one of you about the speech that Benjamin Netanyahu gave today. Some of the people will say that it was a good speech. He convinced. He was, and the rhetoric, it was amazing. He built it in a good way. Mr. Liebman, you don't agree.
It was an excellent speech. Everyone knows that he gives good speeches, and that was proven again tonight. But if we talk about any impact on the deal that's being developed with Iran, the only possible impact is the negative of our impossibility of getting a 2/3 override in Congress. There's no positive impact. And in terms of any impact on the elections, all I can tell you is while he was giving the speech, certainly we in Yesh Atid, but I'm sure other parties, were running around the country, speaking to voters, presenting our platforms, and hitting elections the way we believe they should be done.
With all the applause that he got, while
Somebody
they are
counted.
talking with the voters, maybe, he talked to the national TV. Everyone just broadcast his speech. All Israelis saw how the entire Congress is getting up and applauding him each and every punchline that he gave. Of course, Sarah Netanyahu was there and applauding her husband. So it's just, is it maybe he is affecting the voters, unlike you meeting them face to face? He's affecting the voters via TV, via the Congress.
I'm not sure this will affect the voters. I think a lot of people have made up their mind. I think it was a great speech, a historic speech, one that had to be stated for a long time. And I think history will tell whether this made a difference, not just in these elections, but in the big scheme of things against Iran. I think we have to ask ourselves, is it the world would excuse people that make mistakes, people that perhaps would hurt relationships with America, but it would not excuse a country and a leader that stood idly by when our number one weapon is on its way to acquire a nuclear, our number one enemy is on its way to acquire a nuclear weapon.
2 weeks before election?
Yeah.
Well, the timing wasn't great, I agree.
Well, bottles, controller, speech at the Congress, everything before the election. Timing is not his thing this time. But here goes. A few things. One, the White House comment to the speech. All talks, no action.
By the way, and I will just complete, Barack Obama said, I didn't watch the speech.
Of course he didn't. He was in a conference call.
Benjamin Netanyahu didn't give any alternatives. So just saying, I didn't watch you, and I don't want to listen to what you're saying.
The United States president was on a conference call, and he couldn't really get off the call to watch Benjamin Netanyahu's speech. I'm sure he has TiVo, so he's going to record it. Number two, people were talking about, people were talking, he's going to watch reruns.
I'm not sure he has that.
Yeah, okay, never mind. The White House has everything you can imagine and some things you can't really imagine. Number two, which is extremely important. I think while great English, very good punctuation, very good pauses, somebody counted, he got more standing ovation than Churchill. He broke the record. Churchill was the record holder. The last time Benjamin Netanyahu got more standing ovation.
So maybe his wife is right when she's saying that he might be
Sarah's always right.
He might
Sarah's
be
always
to be
right.
the next president of the United States.
Sarah is always right.
He's so popular in the United States that he might be the next president of the United States.
And here goes the important thing. He's skidding down the polls. Yesterday poll by the Knesset channel showed 24 seats to the Zionist camp and 21 seats to the Likud.
Very interesting one.
Yes, which yesterday shifted completely the movement of the seats and the division of the seats, because we saw the Zionist camp bleeding 2 seats out last week, and then I think the trip to the Congress is very controversial. Now the question, I saw Isaac Herzog comment to the speech. Okay, sorry.
Just this, let me.
One important thing that has to be said is, and we say this at all events, there's wall-to-wall support in the Knesset and in Israel. We are against the deal that's developing. It's not a political issue here. But the question then becomes, okay, so we agree about that.
It's a wall-to-wall all around the world.
You don't hear that.
MK Littman.
You don't hear that in support for Netanyahu.
When you say
once he made the
Benjamin
decision,
Netanyahu to actually come to the Congress and say that?
He made the decision to go. I think Yesh Atid and I think the Zionist camp should stand behind him, and they have not been
disagree.
doing
Not during election time.
We've been very clear about being against the deal. There were ways to go about it, including meeting with members on the Capitol Hill without a big public speech in the face of the president. But I think that Israeli voters, after 1 or 2 days, are going to get back to asking the question, what is your plan to deal with housing? What is your plan to deal with all the various issues on the table? And they don't have a plan.
By the way, I will just say, the United States is giving a reaction, saying he didn't give any alternative. He's not giving any alternative also in the Iranian issue. Let's not talk about
the aircrafts are waiting for the
No,
alternative.
he did
But when you say wall to wall, you have to be very careful. It's not wall to wall.
Sign a better deal or not sign at all.
With all due
You
respect,
had 20 minutes to speak in Congress. This is not
with
the
all
place
due
to
respect, 50.
elaborate
50 minutes.
on the
40
deal that
minutes.
needs to be
50.
signed.
40 minutes.
Sign a better
50.
deal or don't sign at all.
He has
This is not an alternative.
That
he
is
had
For
50 minutes.
Belgian people, this is not an alternative. You want to...
Well, no. With all due respect, you cannot come as a sovereign country to another sovereign country, which is probably the sheriff sovereign country of the world. If you disagree with me, we can talk about it. But the United States is the sheriff of the world. You cannot come from Israel and tell them, well, there is a negotiation that you've been taking on for the last year. We have tried to impede the negotiation and say we have a different outlook on the negotiations. And if you do not mind the final draft of the negotiations, the deal you're going to strike, well, we don't like it. Don't sign it at all. We don't have anything in alternative, but don't sign it at all. It doesn't really work. I don't know much about diplomacy, but the last time I've read, a president or prime minister of a sovereign country cannot come to another prime minister of another sovereign country and say, this is not good, but I have no alternative.
Just before we continue.
He did, but it's not going to happen.
Person in history that is invited to
Gentlemen, I just want to go live to the White House.
So there is some accomplishment.
Gentlemen, just want to go live to the White House and listen to Barack Obama.
What I also know is that he made the same argument before this current interim deal, and even his officials in his own government had to acknowledge that Iran has, in fact, maintained their end of the bargain. So what I'm focused on right now is solving this problem. I'm not focused on the politics of it. I'm not focused on the theater of it. And my strong suggestion would be that members of Congress, as they evaluate it, stay similarly focused. All right? Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everybody.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
It seems that Barack Obama is really angry.
Yeah, even the way he's sitting, you don't see
it's
him.
like sitting
he's not sitting back the way. He's sitting forward.
He's
being proactive. You see it, and this is what we were afraid of.
The question is he sitting like that and he's angry because Benjamin Netanyahu did what he did, or because he's realizing that Benjamin Netanyahu might be right?
Well, he can't realize that Benjamin Netanyahu is right, because Benjamin Netanyahu is telling him what you've done for the last year and a half, backdoor and front door policies and negotiations, is no good. He doesn't present any alternative to it. So Benjamin Netanyahu didn't really tell him you're wrong. He just said, well, the whole thing about looking at Iran as a normative country is problematic. Please don't. And why? Because there was Holocaust, we're under attack, and that ISIS, of course he said, ISIS and Iran are fighting to who's going to be leading the extreme ultra.
But look what he did. Look, so just pay attention to what Barack Obama just said. He said even members from his own,
of course.
From his own government were against this and saying that he's not offering any alternative, which means that he's also intervening with what is happening
here. That is a major problem here in the political spectrum. With all due respect, once he decided to go to Washington and give that speech, I would expect Yesh Atid and I would expect the Machaneh Tzioni and even Meretz to stand. The Zionist camp to stand behind him. What they are dealing with over there, what Naftali Bennett and what Benjamin Netanyahu are dealing with there, is not only backlash from the Democrats, but primarily internal backlash from here. Once he's made the decision, support him, stand behind him.
I will let you answer. I swear to God. Let's see. What Israeli opposition leader of the Zionist Union, Isaac Herzog, had to say about that.
Make no mistake, as Prime Minister, I will totally be committed to ensuring that Iran never develops a nuclear weapon. And on this, we have no argument with Prime Minister Netanyahu. But the Zionist Union has a different approach. We will protect Israel against a nuclear Iran by working together with our allies and with our best friend, the United States of America, and not against it.
Okay. Okay. I just need to understand something. Did someone right now just hint that he might go to a united government with Benjamin Netanyahu?
Yes, of course they did. It's already on the table for the last 3 weeks.
So he just gave us the biggest hint of them all.
Well,
he might not have a choice.
But look, the numbers.
What?
Guys, this is politics.
Listen.
First, with all due respect, 2 weeks before the election, you do not stand behind the candidate you want to defeat when he does such a move. What you say is, we support the general notion, however, he's wrong in that notion.
One second. If you would stand behind him, it would be much more
No, I disagree. I disagree completely. Because he's
that.
trying to differentiate himself from Benjamin Netanyahu for the last 3 weeks. He's unable to. This is the strike. This is where he differentiates himself from Benjamin Netanyahu. And I am sure that tomorrow he will say, I have a different solution if we think about the security issue. Second thing, the numbers do not add up unless we finish the elections on the 17th, and then 3 days when we count everything, and then on the 19th, we'll start another campaign for another election. We will not have a narrow government that will be stable. So they're heading towards national unity.
I want to, yes, no.
So in terms of speculation...
Without Yesh Atid, I'm sorry.
In terms of speculation, what will happen March 18th, let's wait 2 weeks. These 2 weeks, you're going to see the roller coaster up and down, and like I've been promising you every single week that I'm here, we will be the surprise. But let's talk about the speech for the moment. I've been getting phone calls and emails from leaders of Jewish groups in America. It's not just a question of Congress saying you need to be outspoken. We need to be able to look at people and say it's not everyone in Israel. It's not everyone behind the Prime Minister on this. People do see something wrong with this. It's helpful for them to be able to say not that it's a political issue initiative, but it is controversial, and that there are people there that do agree with Democrats and even some Republicans, people who are against the speech taking place. So I don't think it's fair to say it was purely a political issue. There is a legitimate controversy here where it was important for us to come out and say we, as leaders in Israel, disagree, not with the issue about the deal, but with the strategy of going to Congress. Obviously. And that was very important for us to state for Jewish Americans and for members of Congress.
The problem is that we live in a soundbite world. People don't have time to look into the context of this issue. And when they see the opposition, or when they see the internal opposition not supporting Netanyahu, undermining him in America, it doesn't do well for Israel. It doesn't do well for the Israeli people.
It doesn't sound like a democracy when you stand behind the leader of the country as an opposition. Opposition is an opposition.
Sounds like more like Azerbaijan.
That's what they do. Yeah, they need to oppose. Well, not with the T-shirts
Yes.
and their Atletico Madrid and so on and so forth. But we'll let that be for a second. And let me say one more thing. Numbers and two small items from the speech. 10% of the Congress was not there. About 45 members of the Congress and about 8 members of the Senate did not come. Most of them from the Democratic Party. The other thing, Nancy Pelosi was crying during the speech. And when she left...
Said she was on the verge of crying.
Well, she said she shed some tears.
Over what? What did she say?
Here goes.
On the verge.
She said that she was so mad at Benjamin Netanyahu giving that speech. She's a long-standing Democrat. We have to understand.
The insult to intelligence of the American people.
And that's what she said. And that was the punchline. She said, this speech was an insult to the intelligence of the American voter. This speech is an insult to the United States and its president, which means President Barack Obama will now bunker himself in the position that he's going to pass this bill, no matter what, because he needs to pass it as a bill in the Congress. And that means that the Congress will not avoid this.
Allow me to see to point out the full half of the glass. That 90% of Congress was there.
Yeah, of course.
And that most of them actually did stand up and gave him 20 standing ovations.
More than Churchill. Yeah,
20.
more than Churchill.
You know, Alan Dershowitz says that one of the problems
in
the Jewish world and in Israel...
I swear to God, if he will run for the presidency of the United States, he will be
one of the problems...
Benjamin Netanyahu.
Oh, I thought Dershowitz.
No, Dershowitz says that one of the problems in the Jewish world and in Israel is that we spend 90% of our time arguing about the 10% that we disagree about. Now, most of Israel, you included, agree that this is going to be a bad deal. And that we need to speak out about it, and that's what I didn't see in the opposition, and it was lacking, I think.
Well, we just spoke at the beginning with Economy Minister Naftali Bennett, and he said, well, yes, I know that I disagree with, he was there in the speech, and I know I disagree with Benjamin Netanyahu. He is my rival, but it's my duty to stand behind him and to stand behind him.
Too bad
on
he didn't
this.
remember that during wartime this past summer. Now he remembers it now.
Forgot.
Let me just remind you what the Minister of Security said about Naftali Bennett yesterday. He said what he did is almost on the verge of treason during wartime. That's what he said about Naftali Bennett. He said that if he started speaking to the members of the staff, of the IDF staff, behind his back, got intel from other people that were close to him during wartime and did not warn the system, it was on the verge of treason.
With all that, he stood behind him in Washington.
Oh, come on.
With all that.
Are you kidding me? Of course it's political. The guy,
so cynical.
Okay, Bennett, no, okay.
Well, maybe if we need 2 years in the Knesset makes you cynical.
Let me do this. MK Lippman, let me do this because you're vested. Let me say this. Okay, Naftali Bennett, you are vested. But you're doing a great thing. Looky here, Naftali Bennett did not stop bleeding from any part of his body ever since the Ohana fiasco. Naftali Bennett, yes, he did. We saw all the polls. I know this is a great move, but I know it's not. I know it's not of your interest. I know it's not substantial to you, but it is substantial to the numbers of seats because the elections are on the 17th of March. Whether you like it or not, whether you want to see it or not, and this election will mean that either Isaac Herzog or Benjamin Netanyahu are going to be the prime ministers of Israel, and Naftali Bennett has a clear-cut favorite for his prime ministerial position. He wants Benjamin Netanyahu. So if he had to stand on the stairs to hell to show
many others that
and he
support
wants Netanyahu to call
of course,
elections.
Of course, he wants to be the second in command.
What will happen if Netanyahu wins and turns to you for support?
Well, that's not going to happen.
We have clear lines in terms of what we would demand, and we have no problem being strong members of an opposition if that's what we have to do.
Yeah.
It's an issue of values, and it's not an issue.
It's not going to happen. He's not going to.
He's not going. I believe that he's not going to give the call to Yair Lapid this time.
He may have to.
Yeah, well,
he may have
we
to.
will. But
watch
we'll
the
be
polls tomorrow.
We'll be
and
smarter.
The day after.
We'll be smarter not tomorrow and the day after. We'll be smarter Sunday and Monday. That's when we're going to see the washout of this speech, and then we're going to see, because everything is pointing out, and I know, I've been doing surveys, I know the surveys limitations, and we spoke about it, and I think Yesh Atid are going to be the surprise. Again, they're working grassroots, which is a great tactics. However, Benjamin Netanyahu is working on the facade of being the next leader. Right now, he's losing.
It's not only this, he is almost sure that he is going to be, it's like going to the Congress and giving the speech, although he gave the same line that we all already know and realize about Iran. Like he said, it's not something new.
It is important to say he believes in this. He deeply believes in this.
He sees not just a political move.
No, I agree.
Again,
I agree. If it was only a political move, it would have been a very bad thing for the state of Israel. Yes,
it's in his blood.
He sees the Iranian issue as the most important
one, and I think it is.
I agree.
But I want to say,
we'll have to make the difference.
It's not Eli Ohana, it's Iran. And I want to say,
well, it's not Eli Ohana and it's not Iran. It's poor people. It's housing.
History will judge not a bad relationship, not a bad speech. History will judge us if we stand idly by and our worst enemy is about to attain a new
history. No one's saying to do that. No one's saying to do that.
So why don't you support him when he opposes that?
We told him, go meet with the caucuses, go meet with them. We will openly support you in doing so.
There.
Can you imagine if the Secretary of State came into the Knesset and spoke against the Prime Minister, what kind of outcry there would be here?
There.
Oh, come on.
He's already there. Why don't you empower him when he's there?
Because this is black and white on this issue for us.
The Americans were here during Lebanon 8 times. 8 times they said, what's going on in Lebanon is not a smart thing for Israel to do. And in the American notion of things, and MK Lippman knows that very well, when the Americans said it's not a smart thing to be in Lebanon, it means you need to get out of there. Israel didn't get out of there.
The Americans also said a lot of things in 1967 and in 1948. They said that Israel is a bad idea.
Of course they did.
We don't always have to listen to the world.
I agree. Of course they did.
What I'm trying to say, more than he's...
What you're saying that if they said that in 67 and 48, then forever they're going to be wrong. Which is a great pattern of thinking. Well, that's the pattern you're trying to put here on the table.
I just want
the pattern you're putting on the table.
With time, whether this was a good idea or a bad idea.
You know, I weren't here for a week, so you know, just let me just...
Thank you for coming back. Welcome back.
I want to just say what I have to say. For 2 weeks, I was in Azerbaijan. For 1 week, I didn't speak English that much, and I didn't speak Israeli election.
Really.
I didn't speak a lot of Israeli election. But you know, when the United States and when Nancy Pelosi is saying that it's patronizing and maybe disrespecting the Americans, and isn't it a little bit patronizing to go, and this is what I wanted to say, basically coming from the point that you're saying, I will go to the U.S. Congress, I will say what I want to say, I will point a finger in the eyes of Barack Obama. It's patronizing to come and say, I'm going to win the elections, the Israeli elections. I am going to be the next prime minister for the next 4 years. And basically, all of you can do whatever you want because I am your next prime minister.
I'm not sure he's there in his thinking, and
he's there.
When he called elections, he certainly assumed.
Listening to some sources from the prime minister's office, he's there. This is the problem. I think that when sources from the prime minister's office are saying that Benjamin Netanyahu is really relaxed in the last few weeks. He is like, he's not worried. He is not, and basically are saying that they know that they're going to win the elections. The question is, what are the numbers? This is a problem.
Let's put aside for a moment the intelligence of the American people, and let's talk about the intelligence of the Israeli people. They're not going to be sold on this. They're asking the questions, what are your plans to help my children's education, the health system, housing? The people are asking these questions. So we come along with our platform, 276 pages and 26 chapters. This is our plan. What's your plan? And when I said on panels, Likud members, there is no platform. It's just Netanyahu's security. I don't think it's going to work this time with the American people. And the Arutza Knesset poll of 21 seats shows that. They're almost where they were when they started. He assumed going to elections, I'm Mr. Security, people will vote, it'll be a cakewalk, right-wing, ultra-Orthodox coalition, and it's over. That's not what's happening.
Well, there's a huge issue here. Oh, go ahead.
No, I think that right now on the table is a security issue, with all due respect, with Iran. And I do think that Netanyahu and his party and the Likud are concerned about housing, are concerned about standard of living. Right now, you can't have a standard of living if you don't live.
Yeah. Okay.
Right?
Let me answer. Let me answer.
But this is not. No, but you know, we've been hearing about the Iranian nuclear bomb for years.
We are housing all the time. We've been hearing about housing. Apparently,
you have an apartment. Here goes. You have an apartment. Well, I know.
And I will not have an apartment.
I don't even know what I'm voting for.
I'm talking. No, that has nothing to do with it. Here goes. Benjamin Netanyahu, as a good politician and as a great campaigner, knows what are his weaknesses and what are his strengths. He knows he's Mr. Security. He knows that. In '96, he was Mr. Economy. He was voted in on the ticket of the economy. It's the economy stupid, and he was smart about it. This time around, 2 terms, he's voted in on the security issue. Now, in 2000...
But is he Ariel Sharon? He's not Ariel Sharon.
No, he's not. Definitely not. He doesn't even come close to Ariel Sharon. He has an issue with his background as a soldier, and he's trying to compensate for it. That's okay. But here goes. When we look at the surveys, and we look at the polls, and we look at what's going on in the Israeli arena, while people are threatened by the Iranian bomb, people have nothing to put on the table. People are sending their kids to a crumbling educational system. People are not sure about their positions. The South is falling apart, period. People are losing their positions in Beersheba, in Dimona, in Arad, in the Dead Sea. People are losing their positions. Now, the latest survey about what is the most important thing to Israel in this upcoming election, for the first time, security fell under 40%. People said, yes, security, but if we will not have jobs, we will not have food, we will not have dwelling, we will die regardless of the bomb.
Because
so how long can we wait for this?
Make it seem like we're living in a third world country.
We are.
Seriously.
According to the OECD, we are.
We've been around for
According to the OECD, we are.
We've been around for 66 years.
And that means
there's a gradual improvement in people's standard of living.
You're reading, with all due respect, wait.
One more thing, please.
Okay, let's talk about the facts. Let's not talk about what you do with your hands.
Ask for Kabbalot.
The facts
you know
are
what Kabbalot is?
Receipts.
The head of your party was Minister of Finance for 2 years. Where are the receipts? Where are the results?
Everyone is welcome to go on the Yeshatid. I have to answer that. To go on the Yeshatid website and see a list of the results. A list of the accomplishments.
Feed people
asking a politician.
Prices down in a year and 8 months, my friend.
Okay.
You know
Half an hour.
well.
I just realized. No.
Have a
gentleman.
That's really it.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. They will continue arguing. I just understand election show just tomorrow here. They will continue arguing. Thank you very much for being with me tonight. I'm back here tomorrow night. Good night.